Welcome into the Coaching Clubhouse with Adrian Last.
Hello, and thanks for joining me today in the Coaching Clubhouse. This is our regular conversation about coaching with me, Adrian Last. And today I'm talking to Professor Rebecca Jones, co-founder of the Inclusive Leadership Company, which we'll be hearing about shortly. Rebecca is also a professor in coaching at Henley Business School, director of the coaching group, and a chartered psychologist, as well as a keynote speaker, and clearly also a podcast guest. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi there.
Do you do many of these now then, podcasts?
I suppose it's what would you define as many? I think I was adding up. I think I was on 6 podcasts last year. Okay. So, and then we also have our own podcast, Coaching at Henley. So right. Not including those. So yeah, I mean, I love podcasts. I started, I had my own podcast, The Coaching Academic, which I started about 6 or 7 years ago. And did that for about 5 years, just because I love listening to podcasts and thought, it'd be quite cool to do my own. It was very kind of basic, but it was fun. And then, yes, now we've got a more official Henley Business School podcast, which I'm involved with. And we're about to start recording season 3 on that. So, okay. Yeah, so still an avid podcast listener and enjoy coming on podcasts when I get invited.
Well, thanks for being here today. And look, it's the second time you've appeared on this podcast, so thank you. And the last time you were here was, I think, about 18 months ago. Now, what do you think has changed in the time that you were here last, I guess, 18 months ago, and where we are now?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I can't believe it was 18 months ago. That feels like it's gone really quickly. I think that, I mean, things in coaching, in some respects, things evolve quite slowly. You know, lots of what we do in coaching hasn't changed massively. In fact, at Henley Business School, we're celebrating 20 years of our coaching certificate this year.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing. I haven't been there for 20 years, but so we've done a bit of reflecting back, and some of my colleagues have been practicing coaching for 20 years, and it's been interesting hearing from them in terms of what's changed and what hasn't changed over that time. So in fact, there's perhaps quite a few things that haven't changed that much, even in 20 years. So in 18 months, I'm not sure a huge amount has changed. Although I would say, I think there are certain conversations that are gaining more traction over the last 18 months. And one of those is around the use of AI and how that might influence the coaching profession, and perhaps what we need to do as coaches to adapt to this change that's coming. So that certainly seems to be an ongoing conversation. And, something which is very close to my heart, but I think is certainly the circles that I move in, if you like, is around diversity and inclusion and coaching, and perhaps the role or place that coaches have got to play around supporting diversity and inclusion in organizations. And that links to this whole debate around whether as coaches we're truly impartial or neutral, whether we have biases, or whether we can ever be completely non-judgmental. And I think there's, especially given the current political climate around certain parts of the globe, it seems to be important conversations that are happening at the moment.
Yeah, and it's, we can see what's going on around the world. And, I think so many people, millions of people are incredulous about, what's happening. We won't dwell too much on that. But what because we're in the early part of 2025 as we record this, what is it? Are those the two sort of hot topics that you're seeing in coaching? And I suppose for coachees, what are they focused on AI and also diversity and inclusion as well?
I would say not, actually. I would say for coachees, it's many of the similar challenges are still there. It's things like how to navigate and manage very challenging workloads and your own well-being, plus your desire to progress, and kind of just how do we cope with that as individuals in that doesn't seem to be pulling back. The kind of always on culture is as prevalent as ever.
Yeah.
Things are changing all the time. It's just tough for people that particularly who are ambitious, but they equally recognize that they're not machines. They need to look after themselves as well. So that seems to be a key theme still. And there are also, for me, certainly with the clients that I work with, it's things like understanding their own confidence and self-belief and the kind of narratives they tell themselves and how that might help or hinder their progress at work. So in that respect, I don't think any of those topics are new. They're still very real for people. Through the business inclusive leadership company, we specifically coach people on inclusive leadership. So it's a kind of different type of coaching. They have come to us because they want to understand how to be more inclusive. So of course, in those conversations, we are really focused on inclusion and helping people to raise their awareness of where they're at and what they could do to improve. So in those types of conversations, we in some respect, we've already got the main topic is decided before they even turn up, which is a bit different to your traditional coaching, which, as the coach, you never know what your client's going to bring to the session until you get there.
Yeah, totally. And just staying on that subject of inclusivity, in my role at ITV Studios, it's one of the things that we're very focused on, and so are many organisations, and so there should be. I think what we see is everybody across the organisation has to play their part in this. As leaders and managers, clearly we're role modelling and sort of championing that in many ways. Just going back to your role as co-founder of the Inclusive Leadership Company, tell us more about your perspective there and where are the success stories that you've seen?
Yeah, so we set up the business, I think, around 4 years ago now, actually. And my co-founder, Priscilla Piriera, we've known each other for a long time. In fact, about 20 years. We're good friends. And she had a corporate career as well as she has a PhD in gender studies. And about 5 years ago, she exited her corporate life and decided to set up her own business. And that was when she approached me and said, look, what do you think? Would you like to come in on this with me? She knew that we had this shared interest in inclusion and ED&I. And so that was where the idea came from. And I think for us, it's exactly as you've just described. We really believe that inclusion is, it's the right thing to do because we want to live in a fair and equitable world. And for that to happen, inclusion is really, really important. But also it's good for business because when people feel included, they're going to bring their whole selves to work. They're much more likely to reach their full potential. They're able to thrive. We're able to benefit from all the diverse, unique, amazing skills that people have, rather than working in an organization which is full of kind of clones of the leader, if you like. So that is something that we really, really believe in. But also we recognize the important role that leaders play, which is why we focused in on inclusive leadership. Because until we actually support leaders to understand what it means to be an inclusive leader, we're always going to be stuck where, unfortunately, we've got a society filled with systems of oppression that are often hidden and they're complex and they're difficult to challenge. But if, as leaders, we have awareness of those and we know how to work to mitigate those where we can, then we can really be in a position to support our people to thrive and reach their full potential. So that was specifically why we wanted to work with leaders. And we brought together our skills, our academic skills. So we developed things like assessments and diagnostics. And then we couple those with coaching, primarily. Priscilla's a coach as well as of course, I'm a coach. And we find that that's a really effective methodology at helping people to understand themselves better in a safe, non-judgmental environment. We recognize that inclusion is hard. The world around us isn't actually built for people to easily include. Is much easier for us to exclude other people. So yeah, and it's massively rewarding. It's I really believe if you have the privilege of working in a way that's aligned with your purpose and values, it's an amazing experience, really, because then your day job is something you deeply care about, and I'm very lucky to be in that position.
I mean, from my perspective, with my job, I absolutely see that, and absolutely see the success and the change actually in the last kind of 4 or 5 years. Is that change? Are you seeing that change? I suppose from where you're sat, working in inclusive leadership company.
Well, probably if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I might have given a different answer. So I think that at the moment, it's February 2025, we are definitely seeing, we're in a kind of uncertain period of time, I think. And, it's been very well publicized in the US, this kind of backlash against ED&I, the rolling back of certain policies that support ED&I. And what we're seeing at the moment, certainly in our organization, is there are some organizations that I feel are just pausing. They're waiting to see what's happening. And those are probably the organizations that weren't fully committed to it in the first place, if I'm honest, because on the other side, you've got other organizations that truly are committed to ED&I and inclusion specifically. And of course, they're continuing regardless of what's happening, because I guess for some, it's perhaps a reason to scale back if they can have a legitimate, what they feel is a legitimate reason to not invest in this side of things. So that's happening. I think for many organizations, the trend we've seen, which we fully support, is wanting to really embed inclusion, inclusive leadership into other forms of talent development. And that's what I hope for the future, is that we just recognize that this is an important leadership skill. It's not an add-on or an extra. It's just part of understanding what it means to be an effective leader. So that's what we are seeing with those more kind of progressive organizations that really recognize the value in this. They're not just thinking, well, this is part of our EDI strategy. They're thinking this is part of our leadership development, talent development strategy, and how can we really embed this? So I hope that trend will continue, and we'll kind of get through this blip where some organizations are perhaps seeing it as an excuse to scale back. But even as a consumer, I think it tells you a lot. It tells you, which are the organizations that I want to spend my money with, that I support their values. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing. And hey, if we look back in history, we can't progress as a society without sometimes going back a little bit first. So I guess in that respect, it was always inevitable, unfortunately.
Yeah, sadly, probably it was inevitable. But bringing it back to coaching, I suppose what you were saying there about making sure that leaders and managers in organizations in particular have got the right training, the right skill sets. Clearly there's a role for coaching here as well. What are you seeing in terms of what we should be looking for and practicing as coaches in this really important area?
So I think for me, the number one thing is ensuring that coaches are knowledgeable about things like bias, discrimination, prejudice, privilege, microaggressions, all of these concepts which you won't automatically be aware of unless you are they affect you personally. And that's one of the things that when we look at the coaching profession, it is a very privileged profession, and I put myself in that category. I'm white, that there are many, I have benefited from many privileges, and therefore it's the onus is on me to learn about that and recognize that and appreciate that not everybody has the same experience of life that I have. And I think that's the key thing. First key thing is for coaches to really understand about this topic, so that when their clients are coming to them and describing a certain situation, they might recognize actually perhaps there's some bias or discrimination that their client is being affected by, which maybe even their client doesn't recognize. And also ensuring that as coaches, we're not perpetuating that. I've just recently written a column for Coaching at Work, which I think is going to be published next month, about my own first-hand experience of being coached, and where I believe and recognize that there was some bias coming in from the coach who was also a woman. But I wanted to talk about my ambition and how I was progressing in my career. And the coach really brought in questions around how that might be impacting my family, my children, whether it was the right thing for me to be ambitious, whether in the future I would look back and regret this.
Right.
And, once you start to understand the different ways in which men and women can be judged for ambition, and there's a fabulous book called The Authority Gap, which talks about this so beautifully. I would really recommend everyone to read that book. You can see that those questions were really making assumptions about whether ambition is appropriate for a woman with a family, a mother. And I hadn't brought any of that into the conversation. And I made it quite clear, no, it's not. That's not what this is about. Tried to steer it back. And it was a really horrible experience. I felt very judged, and that coach was just trying her best to help me. She genuinely, I'm sure she didn't recognize that she was questioning that in a biased way, but I wonder whether if she'd been coaching a man around the same topic, she would have asked, or a father, the same questions. And so until we're aware of those things, we're all susceptible to perhaps taking our clients down a route which maybe is not so helpful and might be influenced by our beliefs around what's normal for a woman, a man, whatever it might be. So yeah, and in fact, we've got a program we're launching at Henley. The dates are going to be released soon, around diversity and inclusion in coaching. So it's especially designed for coaches who want to learn more about this, who want to build their capabilities. So yeah, that will be coming out soon. And I guess the other thing, just to say, in addition to the knowledge, it's the ongoing self-reflective practice, working with a supervisor, engaging in your own reflective practice, whatever that might be, to really keep working on it, because the work is never done, and we're all human, right? I work in the space of inclusion, and I'm by no means perfect. I make mistakes. I have biases. I have assumptions. It's a lifelong work to try and keep evolving and learning, and the space keeps changing. What is acceptable behavior now in 5 years won't be. That's the reality, and that's good. We're evolving as a species into learning how to treat each other better. But yeah, that's part of the challenge, I guess, is it is hard, and so for some it's easier not to engage with this.
Yeah, exactly. We've just got time for one more question, Rebecca, and that's just about team coaching. And I wonder whether there's any link here between kind of coaching for, I suppose, team coaching with inclusivity, or whether these are two separate things. I know I've seen on kind of LinkedIn and other articles I've read that it's a fast growing area. In your Henley role with your colleagues, what have you seen in the people you work with and support? How does it benefit teams?
Yeah, I would say team coaching is a fast growing area. And at the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned around AI and coaching, and perhaps how we need to evolve as a profession to deal with this. And I think team coaching is one of those areas where, at the moment at least, I haven't seen any AI coach bots that would be capable of team coaching, because it's such a complex more advanced style of coaching, I would say,
Yeah.
because when you're coaching a whole team, you're not only coaching the individuals in the team in the moment all together, you're also coaching the relationships, the connections, the dynamics that are coming up. So it's very challenging, it's very complex. And I would say it absolutely links to inclusion, because of course, whenever you've got a group of people, you will inevitably have in-groups and out-groups form. And that's the essence of inclusion and exclusion. If you're in the in-group, you're included. If you're in the out-group, you're excluded. You know, thinking about things like people's needs to belong and how those are met in a group or not, and how that might play out when they're interacting together and how that might affect their performance. So certainly when we have our professional certificate in team and systemic coaching, we do touch on these topics as part of that program. So yeah, I think it's an important skill for us to stay current and kind of AI proof our profession, if you like. And I do think it can be a great tool to actually help unpack and raise awareness of dynamics, exclusion, inclusion issues that might be affecting team performance.
Yeah. Rebecca, we could speak for the next 2 hours, I'm sure, and there's many topics that I'd be keen to get your insights to, but we've sadly run out of time. Now, I know as a former student of Henley Business School that there is a wealth of materials and resources that are available for people interested in coaching. How do we find out more?
So there's multiple ways. I guess the easiest way is to follow us on LinkedIn. So you can find Coaching at Henley is our official Coaching at Henley LinkedIn page, and we share insights, news about events, that type of thing. You can follow me as well. I'm Rebecca Jones. If you search Rebecca Jones Henley Business School, you'll probably find me. But also you can join our Henley Centre for Coaching. We have a membership model where you can join even if you're not an ex-student, and we run multiple sessions, something like 20 webinars a year. We have in-person events, we share insights. So I think for those coaches who really are interested in supporting their CPD, that's a great way of doing that. It's a very good value for money, let's say, as well, in terms of the content that's out there as well. So that's another way of staying in touch. And of course, our podcast, Coaching at Henley podcast, you can check that out as well.
Great, thank you. We'll put some of the links in the YouTube feed and also in LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much again for joining me today. I wish you the very best of luck for the year ahead. There's lots to talk about in coaching and lots to do, and I hope it all goes very well for you.
Thanks. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks again to Professor Rebecca Jones for joining me today in the Coaching Clubhouse. You can listen back to other episodes in this podcast series and also subscribe for future episodes. I'll be back very soon with another guest here in the Clubhouse, but for now, thanks very, very much for joining me.
The Coaching Clubhouse is produced by Adrian Last Coaching. Discover more on the website at adrianlast.co.uk.